what up, everybody? It's Al Mega. Welcome to a new International Comics Crusaders with the homies right here, Mr. Dave Elliott and Chris Buse. What's up, fellas?
Guten Tag. How are you guys?
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Good.
we're doing well. How is it on your side of the world, guys?
It sucks, but that's the way it is. Not getting that vaccine from the UK. People are hoarding it.
I have mine. I don't care. I've got mine.
Great for you, guys. Great for you, sir. Mine is in September. Mine is in September, October coming.
September, October.
Yeah, that's Germany. Efficient as always.
I get my first tomorrow.
Excellent, sir.
Yeah, let's
That's
see what
cool.
happens.
That's very cool.
Hopefully, I don't know.
First,
You heard that guy
first
that
one.
got a shot. Some guy got a shot, and he had a very rare allergic reaction where his skin started melting.
I thought he was getting spider powers.
Ooh.
All right. Yeah, but it's a rare allergic reaction. The dude's okay, but his skin started melting in the area. Isn't that shit crazy? I'm like, oh my god.
That's not your version of okay and my okay are very different. Clearly,
yeah,
he's not okay.
He's alive. He's alive.
He's did you ever see that film, The Incredible Melting Man?
Yeah. Yes. I actually have that movie somewhere.
Wow. That is weird.
Yeah.
That is weird.
It is.
Let's talk about some positive stuff like comic books.
Yeah. In today's topic, you've seen the guys teasing it already all over the interwebs.
Oh, we have. We have.
To reboot or not
reboot.
to. And do they ever work?
Do they? Do they at all?
Yeah, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. We're going to discuss that today.
Is DC watching? I hope so.
I'll tell you right now, me, it's maybe like a 70-30 balance, maybe a working to not working.
And what is the 30? What is the 30? The working part?
Yeah. Which is which? Yeah.
30% is the working part. Sometimes they work. Sometimes
is that high? Is that high? Is it?
I think it's the majority of the time it doesn't. I mean, there's been few exceptions, and I'm glad that you're pointing out to me one of those exceptions here.
Where are our beautiful commentators? Did we scare them off last week or the week before with the Snyder Cut discussion?
No, they'll come. No worries about them. It is what it is. They're coming.
Come on. Blood's got to be out there. Sushi's got to be there. Dave Johnson's got to be there. Yeah, come on.
No, they will be. Come on, guys.
And please, give us your opinions. Give us your thoughts. Tell us what you think is a good reboot or not.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, I would love to. Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's big to indie or what, because obviously in indie we've also seen changes in characters, of course.
And don't you just love how Dave used the font of Back to the Future? Isn't that lovely? That man is an art genius. I tell you right there. Yeah. That is so good.
I'm glad you noticed that.
I do.
That was quite deliberate.
I noticed that.
All right, jump into your car for this awesome ride. Boom, boom, boom.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what is this?
I don't know.
This is your stuff right here, Chris. From what the stuff that you sent me.
Yeah.
This
is the. I mean, this is probably not the first issue where they appeared in, but I think it's the first issue actually. I should have done some research on this. But anyway, what do you notice when you look at this cover? Who's missing? No
Wonder Woman.
No. And Wonder Woman will join later, but Superman and Batman are missing. Why? Do you know why?
Oh, yeah. This is before their time.
No, this is it's before Superman, right? Superman wasn't invented yet. No, the thing is, what many people do not know or realize is that DC originally were three companies. You had National Comics, which had Superman. You had Detective Comics, which had Batman. And all these characters you see here, including Wonder Woman, were with All Star Publishing. So this is its own company.
Okay.
Harry Donenfeld, who was the big boss of DC Comics and who eventually consolidated all these companies, he had a stake in all of these companies. He basically stole all these companies in the end. Stole allegedly, quote unquote. Don't sue me. But the thing is, go back. The thing is, this started the germ of what we know of as the Justice League today. It started not with DC Comics proper, but with their, shall we call it, an offshoot, All American Publishing. Do you know who the guy was who ran All American Publishing? That was Max Gaines, the father of Bill Gaines. Max Gaines founded DC Comics. So this is his first venture into comics is All American Publishing, a joint venture with Harry Donenfeld and Jack Leibowitz, and he has all the cool characters. And since he has all the cool characters, he says, well, let's team those up. And we have Wonder Woman. She can be the secretary of the team. That's how Wonder Woman started on this team, as the secretary. I mean, that is the 1940s here we're talking.
Well, that's crazy.
So we see all these,
still a powerhouse of a hero, and they relegated her to desk duty. That's so messed up. Seriously.
That's the 1940s. And what you see here is, you see a lot of these characters, when we talk about reboots, a lot of these characters will get rebooted. I mean, I can count The Flash gets a reboot, Hawkman gets a reboot, Dr. Fate sort of gets a reboot, Green Lantern definitely gets a reboot, the Spectre was sort of transported to Earth 1 before Denny O'Neil originally killed him off. If not many people know that, but Denny O'Neil killed him off. But then he got better. And then we had we have the Sandman. Kirby did his own version of Sandman, but we know there is a Sandman out there. And then the guy with the blue mask, that's the original Atom. So we also got a reboot of the Atom. So basically all these characters were rebooted at a later point in time. And what the Justice Society, what makes this Justice Society so interesting is, this is really the first superhero team. This is long before the Avengers, this is long before anything else. This is the first real superhero team. And this is how they started. And then when we go to the 1960s, and this is where Dave and I will share, if you go to the next slide, this is not the first cover, because the first cover is something else. I think, no, this is the Brave and Bold. It's misleading. It's not Justice League, it's the Brave and the Bold. You see the Brave and Bold cover, logo there in the top.
First appearance.
That's the first appearance. That's the first appearance. That is issue 28 of the Brave and the Bold. It's a series that dates back to the 50s. And when we talk about reboots, we need to talk about Julius Schwartz. Who was Julius Schwartz? Julius Schwartz was a guy who was an editor at DC, but his career started a little bit differently. He was first a fan of pulp magazines when he was a young kid of 15, 16. And he got together with a friend and he said, well, let's do an agency for these pulp writers, which was quite novel because they were 18, 19 years old. And they got some real name talent writers as their clients. And the other guy who was his friend who founded Solar Talent Agency, they called it, was Mort Weisinger. And how is Mort Weisinger familiar? Because Mort Weisinger went to DC Comics, he became the successor to Whitney Ellsworth, who was the first editor on Superman. And so Mort Weisinger was already at DC, and when the pulps really lost steam, Julius Schwartz was without a job, and he said, well, what is my buddy doing? And he said, oh, come to DC and you can be an editor here. And the thing is, once again, what we see here is history repeating itself, because who do we not see on this cover? No Batman, no Superman. Why is that? Because Julius Schwartz was allowed to have all the characters he wanted for his team, for his reboot of the Justice League, of the Justice Society, or Justice League of America. He hated the name Society. He thought it sounded communist. He wanted something that sounded more like sports, like baseball. And who did he not get? Yes, and who did he not get? Batman and Superman. Why? Because Batman was with Jack Schiff. He was the editor, and he said, no way are you using my character. And Superman was with Mort Weisinger. We said, oh, you're my friend, but you're not touching my character either. So we only see Superman and Batman have cameos in the Justice League. Isn't that crazy? Mm. When they start out, there's Martian Manhunter, but no Superman.
Not.
No, it makes sense in a way. I mean, if you look at it another way, like Superman and Batman have been consistent sellers since they were launched. never really lost their own titles, where the majority of these characters did. So it kind of makes sense to like, hey, well, look, let's bring these, shall we say, second stringers, if you like, I mean, together, and maybe having a bunch of second stringers together, they can actually become A stringers by, or at least the title might be, by putting them all in it. And that would make sense because, you know, don't forget, it's, I mean, when this was launched, we're still years away from sales being so poor that you just like, hey, we need Punisher to make an appearance to boost its sales. Yeah.
And actually, and it also holds a lot of water, because what we see in those first couple of issues is you never see the team really acting as a team. They always split off in teams of 2, or they go on solo missions. And so you can get to showcase your favorite hero. Like the Flash already had a magazine at that time. He came out with Showcase. He was rebooted. Green Lantern was rebooted. Martian Manhunter was actually the first Silver Age hero, because he appeared before the Flash reboot. So he's actually the first Silver Age hero of DC. And Wonder Woman was around the whole time. But as I will also show you later when I talk about Wonder Woman, she got a reboot of sorts under Ross Andrew. Ross Andrew, who later became a famous Spider-Man artist, he rebooted, I believe it was with Robert Kanigher, or I believe, but Ross Andrew was the artist, and he rebooted also Wonder Woman in the 50s, in the late 50s. Because before that, a lot of it was reprint from the 40s. And here, what you see here, this is from the first issue. Notice the empty chairs. No Superman, no Batman. Isn't that depressing? You have 7 chairs and 2 are open.
Was that purposely? It's like, come on, guys, we got to bring them in here.
I think that was a signal telling the guys, oh, come on, give me Batman, give me Superman. And they joined later. I mean, they were official members, but you'll never be seen. By the way, isn't that 1950s design cool? And there's the Flash. I mean,
their headquarters look way cool. It was like a James Bond set.
Absolutely. It is before James Bond even. It's absolutely cool. And this is the Flash going on a solo mission. And who you see here is Snapper Carr. So basically you have the teen sidekick, the teen insert character here, who is, go to the next page to see it. He's snapping his fingers. I think it's on the next page, if you go to the next page. Isn't he snapping his fingers? Oh yeah, he's going full Snapper mode. Yeah, he's an obnoxious teen who, under Danny O'Neill, of course, was a traitor. But here you go. But nevertheless, here he was the cool.
Get real here. Would you tolerate somebody continually snapping around you if he was one of your friends and that's all he did, just keep snapping? Would you be able to tolerate it?
But the reasoning for Danny O'Neill to turn him into a traitor was quite cool. He said, well, basically, I'm surrounded by these super gods who treat me like shit, and now I'm getting back at them. That's kind of cool. I mean, that's Danny O'Neill. Okay, but so this is, I mean, this is some cool cool artwork here, isn't it? I mean, this is amazing stuff. It's amazing stuff. I mean, also here, this is from
Mike Sekowsky.
Yeah, Mike Sekowsky. Very underrated artist.
It looks like Sid Shaw's ink.
What's that, Dave?
Looks like Sid Shaw's or Joe Giella inks.
Yeah, I think so too. I haven't checked it, but it's really gorgeous stuff DC did in the early 60s. I mean, also the early Flash stories, ink by Joe Kubert is amazing stuff.
Did it take Snapper to bring Batman? Because look, this is Batman at the time.
Yeah, I said he makes cameo appearances. He's not there for the full story. He's just there for, see, we got go back to these guys. And the guy who's inducted fairly soon is Green Arrow. So Green Arrow is going to take the place of Batman, basically.
Okay.
This is
That's Amazo, right?
Yeah, that's Amazo. That's the first appearance of Amazo. Very cool concept. It's also a great cover, by the way. I mean, the position of Green Lantern here. This is really great artwork. Once again, no Batman.
Now that's #1 cover. That's the Justice League of America #1 cover.
Exactly. And as you see, it shows the recolored version, which looks a little bit nicer, cleaned up. These have all been reprinted, and if viewers want to catch up on this stuff, I mean, it definitely didn't age that well. This is early stuff, but it's still interesting. I mean, this is no Fantastic Four #1, but it's still interesting.
And as you mentioned, Green Arrow in the picture now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he joined in issue 4.
This is cover 6 right there. Oh, this is.
And there we have Superman. There's Superman on the cover for the first time. That's the first cover of Superman, and he's not even really. He's not really a Batman. Look, Superman is hardly on the cover. Batman is hardly on the cover. It's really interesting. Right? This is really bizarre stuff. And this is a very famous issue. This is a very famous issue because this brings together the old team and the new team. Because as a lot of fans know, there was a little issue called the Flash of Two Worlds when the Flash met the Golden Age Flash, and they realized, oh, there's 2 Earths, which kind of makes sense and goes back to Julius Schwartz because he said, well, basically I'm a science fiction guy, and fans ask about these older heroes, what happened to these oldest heroes, and so we basically say they exist on a different Earth, and they're a little bit older, and our young heroes can meet their old counterparts, which is a very cool concept, by the way. This is never been done. It's a very brilliant concept, and from there he took it to several Earths, as we will see. Because we're also going to Earth 3 pretty soon, and this is where the teams come together.
Yep, and you meet Black Canary, obviously becomes later on in Earth 1, if you will.
For a very specific reason.
Wait, and was there ever an explanation why they called Earth 2 if that was the OG Earth?
I don't think so.
They're older. If they came first.
It falls on who did the naming. So it's clearly Earth 1 got to name themselves. Well, we're Earth 1 and you're Earth 2.
So basically, I think that's also the explanation in the Flash issue, where basically the Flash says, oh, there's 2 Earths, so my Earth is Earth 1 and the older Earth is Earth 2. Well, basically. Wow. But here you see also the 2 Flash together. You see the 2 Flash together, the Green Lanterns together. It's an interesting concept. It's actually, I like the legacy concept once they folded all the Earths together in the 80s. I like that too, where you had the idea, oh, these are the fathers or the parents of the younger heroes in part. I like that also, but I like this concept too. It's a great concept. And the television series, The Flash, they made good use of it. Okay, here we go to Earth 3. Here we go to Earth 3. We have the crime syndicate. Yeah, we're getting there. It's the first issue where they appeared, and there we see them in action. The counter Justice League.
He fucked up Batman.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, how Batman survived that? Oh, Lance.
And look, there's Owlman.
Yeah, bro. Finally, a real counterpart that makes more sense.
And he's not even voiced by James Woods here. Okay, this is the beginning of a very interesting 2-part, actually more or less a 3-parter, because as you cannot tell from this cover, this is the Thanos story of the DC universe, because you have a character who's called Aquarius, and he wipes out Earth 2. Everybody on Earth 2 gets wiped out except for 5 or 6 heroes who make it to Earth 1 to warn Earth 1 about the coming threat of Aquarius, who is an all-powerful being. It's very much the Thanos story, and among those heroes is Diana Lance, Black Canary, and her husband, and he is the one who more or less sacrifices himself to beat this all-powerful being. If you go to the next cover, this is a great cover. This is Mr. Neil Adams. This is an amazing cover, and this is the story. This is the story where Lance dies. Is it Detective Lance? I don't know. It's the husband of Black Canary, and he dies. And she says, "Oh, I have nothing to live on. I come to your Earth." And the interesting thing, there's 2 interesting things that happened here. Because for one reason, why does Black Canary join the Justice League? Because Wonder Woman is no longer on the team, because at the same time, Danny O'Neill, who's also writing Justice League, or he's beginning to write Justice League, he turned Wonder Woman into a non-powered superhero. This is the time when she has the white jumpsuit on, and she has no powers anymore, so she can't be on the Justice League. And so what happens is What's that?
No, I'm curious too. Is this also a point in time finally where Superman and Batman are more primary folk as the leaders of the team? Because even them as part of the Bat.
Yeah, because what happened? Because what also happened at the same time is that Jack Schiff, who was the editor of Batman, he got fired from Batman because he heard of New Look Batman. That was Julius Schwartz as well, because he also took on the reins of. He was basically editing every book. He was the Chris Claremont editor of DC Comics at that time. He was editing every book more or less. And he said, okay, of course, now Batman is my character, so he's in the Justice League. And I believe Mort Weisinger was also no longer the editor of Superman at that time. And so Julius Schwartz had free reign. We're in the 60s here now. At the same time, Julius Schwartz is not editing Wonder Woman. That is Jack Miller. And Wonder Woman is under the Romance Comics. And then he comes on board to change Wonder Woman. So she no longer has superpowers. So this is the reason why Black Canary comes onto the book. And then Danny O'Neill does something very, very interesting. He gives us an explanation why she didn't age. And he gives us an explanation what happens when a character leaves Earth 2 to live on Earth 1. Because what happens, she destroys the time continuum. And both Earths are both Earths. What's that? I didn't catch that.
No, go ahead.
Okay, both are. Yeah, Dave.
Yeah. No, go for it. Just I was just trying to take you back to where you were.
And what happens in that story? I mean, this is not this story, but it's one of the following issues. That is Danny O'Neill in a nutshell. The complete DC universe is about to go back. The complete DC universe is about to die, and it's the Spectre who saves everything, and he dies. Isn't that an amazing story? I mean, this is really cool stuff. This is really great comics. If you haven't read those, catch those.
Yeah,
this is really cool stuff.
So at that point, was it just like Thanos did Earth 2 magically? Everyone reappear again?
Yeah. That happened at the end of the story. Everybody came back. They defeated the villain, but her husband was dead, and she said, "Oh, I live on Earth 1 now." And they tried, it's interesting, they tried to hook her up with Batman at first. That is so interesting. So
it's funny in a way, because like obviously one of the things we might have asked today is, so Black Canary's got no other friends but a husband, like no relatives, exactly. Like she's just gonna let's stay here now.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And she's 20 years older before they can come up with an explanation why that is, but it's quite amazing. But that's how comics works. I mean, this is kind of cool in a way. Yeah. And also, I mean, this is also interesting if you think about it. Green Lantern, Green Arrow, Black Canary, they don't have any support characters. They are their own support characters. They hardly have any friends. I mean, the Flash now and then has his parents, because at that time they're still alive. He has his nephew, but Green Lantern has no friends. He has his family, his brothers, but he has no actual friends. All his friends are superheroes.
Yeah.
That is something DC really never really understood, how to build support characters. I mean, Superman is a huge support cast, but he's the only one, actually.
Is that why they eventually hooked up Green Arrow and Canary?
I think so, yeah. I think so. That's basically what it is. And Danny O'Neill was not a great writer for Black Canary, but that's another story. But if you go to the next story, this is the next page. This is the first, I mean, this is already, you see, this is getting close to Avenger territory here. This is an invasion of Earth. It's a two-parter. The next cover is also quite good. If you go to the next cover, that shows the heroes defeated. And this is DC in the early 70s. That's the first Justice League story I read, actually. This two-parter in the 70s. I mean, this is already bleak stuff here, happening in the early 70s. And you say, talking about, comic storylines are so dark these days. I mean, this is the early 70s. Earth gets destroyed. And Earth doesn't get destroyed because the heroes will win in the end. But this is, I need to buy this comic book. What's going on here? The heroes are defeated. I mean, look at Batman. What can I do?
What? Cool. cool.
It's an interesting cover, interesting time, because Wonder Woman was eventually allowed to come back into the team. Because talking about reboots, I talk briefly about that period when I talk about Wonder Woman later. The thing is, Wonder Woman eventually got her powers back, and what they did, what was so interesting, is because Julius Schwartz got hold of Wonder Woman as well, and he said, well, basically, forget all this story in the white jumpsuit. That never happened. What really happened was that her mother had planted this idea into her head because Steve Trevor was dead, and so she should have some adventures and meet some other men in her mind. That was basically the explanation they had there going. It's comic books in the late 60s. Here we go.
Well, that's actually that's not too far from what Odin, like the way they retroed it with Odin and Thor, is that he was always Thor. There was never actually a Don Blake. It was was just, we're just going to let you live as a human for a while.
Yeah, which kind of makes it's kind of the same story. And then eventually she got her powers back. And that's the thing. She had to re-earn her membership. It was not just, I have my powers back. No. She had to prove herself in her own book for 7 issues that she was worthy to be a member of the Justice League again. Nobody else did this ever, but Wonder Woman. Here we go.
Yeah, we're going to let Green Arrow come in because he can fire. He's got a boxing glove arrow. But you, who've got these amazing powers and this magic lasso and an aeroplane and all of that, yeah, you're going to have to do like the 12 labors of Hercules.
Because that was it basically. It was 12 issues. It was modeled on the 12 labors of Hercules. It got it mixed up. 12 labors of Hercules. That was basically what it was. Yeah. And for every issue you had, that was really fun issues. Every issue featured a Justice League character in a side role who was observing Wonder Woman. And then you had a smug Batman who said, she did good today. Wonderful.
That's it's amazing.
Every one of them.
I mean, if you want to connect to our little friend in the Twitter discussion, I mean, don't worry about the bondage, because bondage it's just there to sell comics. But think about this kind of stuff, because that is sexist, very sexist, and it goes to show that comics were written by men at that time. Said, Wonder Woman, what can we do? She has to re-earn the trust of the team now that she has her powers back and that she's a full hero. And it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And these are some horrible stories, actually, but they're not really good.
It was reflected everywhere. It was in, whether it was on TV, film, and so comics was no different. Yeah, but it was also interesting. Then she got to team up with Black Canary, and they was like, girl, you rule, girl power. And he said, okay, yeah, right. But next issue is Batman, who says, well, Wonder Woman, you're not really that strong. That's, by the way, a great cover. I really like that. It's another team up, because also the thing, what happened with these Earths was so interesting when we talk about reboots, is that the way many of these Earths were populated were simply by characters DC bought. Because DC bought Charlton Comics at one point in time. That was Earth so-and-so with Shazam. That was Blue Beetle and the characters. And then they bought the Fawcett characters. So that was Captain Marvel and these characters. So they all had their own Earths. And they began to interact with each other. Quite an interesting concept, after all. It's like if DC was buying Marvel comics today, they could be on their own Earths. It's Marvel Earths. But if it was DC, let's say if DC bought Marvel, not that it could ever possibly happen. But if it did, what would happen is they would all get drawn into the one universe. Like we'd end up with, and because they can't seem to. The interesting thing I found about listening to you and seeing these covers is, wow, this is okay. Well, we've got Captain Marvel, so let's bring him in. Let's have him meet with Justice League, and they couldn't keep that going. They couldn't keep Captain Marvel going. They didn't know how to. The audience had perhaps changed, so they didn't know how to keep it alive. And in a way, like if things had been different, yes, you could have carried on to today. There could still have been a series of Captain Marvel books. We could have still had Earth 2 going quite nicely.
But it's quite interesting what they tried with Captain Marvel, because they originally tried to model him on the way he was. They even got CC Beck the famous Captain Marvel artist to come in, who had left comics. He had opened a bar and said, okay, with that kind of money, I can do a few comic books again. But he hated it. He hated the way DC managed the character. He said, this is not Captain Marvel anymore. And then they did Captain Marvel in the 70s. It was very great art by Don Newton, but it was also not Captain Marvel. It was a cool guy and a cool girl in a red costume.
Yeah.
And I love these stories. The art is fantastic, early Don Newton art. But this is not Captain Marvel the way Captain Marvel was designed by Otto Binder, mostly by C.C. Beck and Otto Binder mostly.
Yeah, Kurt Scheffenberger did quite a few Captain Marvel stories. But yeah, it just wasn't, and it was just, you know, you've acquired, whether you bought it or acquired these characters, and you don't really know what to do with them. You're trying to force them into.
Yeah, Dave and me already had a little bit brainstorming about what we'll do next, and that was we call him Marvel Man. You also know him as Miracle Man, but it's actually Marvel Man. And Marvel Man got bought by Marvel Comics a few years back, and to this day they don't know what to do with this character.
Well,
they were talking about he's too powerful. Bringing him into the Marvel universe makes no sense because he is basically Superman, but more powerful than Superman.
Yeah. And it's I still think it's funny that literally it was a character originally created with no care whatsoever, no love whatsoever. It was just, we've just got to keep on producing some Captain Marvel style comics.
Because Captain Marvel was tremendously popular, and then DC won a lawsuit and he could no longer be published, and so the UK publisher said, "What's the new Captain Marvel stories?" And therefore said, "Well, we're not making any anymore." And so, okay, then we do our own Captain Marvel, and that was basically Marvel Man.
Yeah.
And then Alan Moore got hold of him, and that changed everything. To this day, I will say this run, if you haven't read the original Alan Moore run on Miracle Man, we called him Miracle Man, do that. That's your homework for in 2 weeks' time when we just discuss this character, because this is the best comics you will ever read. I mean, if you haven't read this, it's available. You can read it today. It's available. It's some of the best comics you will ever read, especially once John Totleben comes on and does the art. I mean, damn, these are some great comic books.
It's actually it's a nice way that the art segues from
Gary Leach and then
Barry Leach and Alan Davis, who were very sort of grounded in sort of reality or superhero comics. And if you look at the arc, well, we'll talk about this in 2 weeks' time, but
the way it's going with this.
But you know, the way it just goes to, you know, John Totlben's like it's got that horrific undertones to it. But we'll talk about that in 2 weeks' time. We're talking about Kryptonite No More.
Exactly, which is a very famous storyline, and we're talking about reboots. I mean, when you think about reboots, you start with a new #1 that looks like this is a new #1 because the 1 is very big on the cover, but it's actually not a #1. It's an ongoing series, but this is Danny O'Neill once again, and he came up with a new story. It's an early reboot of Superman. And what Danny O'Neill did was basically said, well, basically forget Kryptonite. Kryptonite is always the same shit. We want something else. And if you go to the next, this by the way, this is one of the very famous cover, one of the most famous Superman covers actually. And if you go, this is great Kurt Swan art. I'm on record on Twitter as not the greatest Kurt Swan fan, but some of that art in the 70s especially, I believe there's Murphy Anderson inking here.
Yeah, it is.
This is really, really good stuff. I mean, also the original colors. This is newsprint. This is the original colors. This is really, really good stuff. And this is how Kryptonite gets destroyed. But at the same time, if you go to the next page, something strange happens with Superman. He creates a duplicate, and this duplicate is siphoning off his powers. And the idea, the reasoning Danny O'Neill had behind this was, what can you do with a character who can basically juggle planets? It's boring. We want a character who can sweat, who can really has to struggle to fight. And Superman is losing a lot of his powers here. He's not as powerful anymore. And this is an interesting. I mean, this is the same what happened with Wonder Woman, but Superman still has powers, but they are not on this huge level anymore. He wanted to bring them back to the Schuster and Siegel level, where he can only jump across buildings, and where he really has to struggle to do things and to get things done. It's an interesting idea. I like it quite.
Yeah. No, that would have been a good way to go. I mean,
yeah. And this is the comic that ended everything. And if you haven't read this two-parter, this is the last issues of Superman. This is how Superman ended. This is Alan Moore once again. Only Alan Moore can write a story like this. And this is basically the last two issues, the last issue of Superman, and there's the last issue of Action Comics until they kept the renumbering going again. But the numbers going again. But this is basically how these books ended. And Superman lost everybody except for Lois Lane. All the supporting characters were killed. This is a very depressing story. It's an Alan Moore story, of course. But this is how the original Silver Age Superman was kicked to the curb to make room for something else. And that was the big reboot that came with the new talent they hired away from Marvel, John Byrne. And if you don't know how big John Byrne was, I mean, Miller and Byrne were the biggest, I think they were the biggest writer-artists at that time. I mean, there was nobody bigger in comics at that time. And to get Frank Miller and John Byrne from Marvel, I mean, that was DC was really, they were really kicking it in the 70s, in the 80s, in the mid 80s. And John Byrne was basically given free reign to reboot Superman. And if I just went to these issues, and I was really astonished how much of the Snyder approach is in these early issues. It's quite amazing. Because if you go to the next page, I mean, this
Before
is
we
Krypton.
do that, though, this cover is the first variant cover as well.
Yeah, it's true. I didn't take that one. The other one. Yeah.
I have both. So this is great. This is what started the variants, folks. Superman started that shit.
Yeah. But if you look at this, I mean, this is Krypton the Zack Snyder way. Hey, this is a very cold, very attached Krypton. It's very technical. It's very technocratic. It's very cold, and this is why Byrne went with this. This is also ties a little bit into the Superman movie, because we also have a very stark, very cold Krypton, and then you have this very homely, very idealized Norman Rockwell, Kansas. I lived in Kansas, so yeah, this is not Kansas. But and very much like in the Snyder movie, he's older when he finds out that he's not from this earth. And Park Kent tells him, basically, you are not of this earth. You were sent here for a reason, son. Yeah. And this is how he finds out.
The only thing the biggest thing I didn't like about this, and I liked most of it a lot. The biggest thing, there was two things I didn't like. And the one was I thought that having the concept that because of the pod that Kal-El was kept in, as basically as an embryo going through space, it gave them the excuse to actually have Superman born on Earth, and in America. So not only was he born on Earth, he was born in America. And
okay, I did catch that. I never catch that actually. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and I really liked the fact that as whether it's realistic or unrealistic, the idea that there was, I preferred the, if you go back far enough, there was one version of the origin where Kal-El's like 2 years old when he's sent to Earth. So he has a sort of he's a toddler when he's put in the ship and sent to Earth. I think that to me always sort of lent more heart, the idea of like you're putting a child that you interact with, you've kissed, they've hugged you, mummy's breastfed, whatever. You're putting that child in a rocket ship and sending them to another planet, rather than just because I liked the fact that, like, sure, in Byrne's version, Jor-El is clearly like he's on an emotional range that's high, like much warmer, shall we say, than the average Kryptonian.
Yeah.
But I think that that coldness, yes, obviously it's, that sums up Zack Snyder's version of Superman quite well. But don't think it was necessary, and I just didn't particularly like it, just so that you could create an American Superman. And
it also takes away any attachment to Krypton. I mean, because basically there's a storyline later where Superman always has this idea of Krypton. Oh, it's a wonderful place, and that's all an illusion. And finally, he learns that Krypton was this very cold planet. He says, "Okay, I haven't," but it doesn't work because he has no connection either way. The only thing he knows is the farm, and it makes no sense. But there were a few things I didn't like about the reboot. I really liked the reboot when it came out, but it fizzled out rather quickly because Byrne had some very strange ideas on this. But there was also some very
Well, the one thing I think the one thing that kind of stopped it almost cold dead for me was in Action Comics when he used Big Barda.
The notorious porn storyline,
and that was just like
with a character called Sleaze, of course.
I mean, that was just like a complete what? I mean, even if you'd said, "Oh, it didn't really happen; it was all in your mind," it was like, no, that's some creepy ass, really sleazy shit to put out.
I think Byrne was going through a divorce at that time.
It doesn't matter. It's like that falls on the publisher. The publishers, the editors should literally, like, I mean,
you wouldn't have let that fly.
No way. That would have been a complete. It's just no.
Yeah, but it's also, I mean, I think the reason why this got printed was at that time DC was really rolling with this sort of dark and gritty shit they had kicked loose with the Dark Knight and Watchmen, and there was we can be edgy, and this is really edgy, and we can do this, and this is DC now.
Yeah, but it was, you also have to look at a time when DC wasn't making money, wasn't their primary business. They were research and development for Warner Brothers mostly, and as long as they made $10 more than they did the year before, they were kind of safe to do whatever they wanted. But obviously, it's a completely different ship now. But it's just.
Yeah, I think that it goes on the one hand goes to Byrne's credit because he did put out 2 or 3 books at the same time. He did the Superman book. I think he wrote Action Comics or Action Comics. He drew and wrote because that was a team up book now. And then there was Superman. I think he also wrote Superman in parts. He wrote
and drew Superman, wrote and drew Action Comics, and then I think it was the Adventures of Superman was the one that Marv Wolfman writing and Jerry Ordway drawing, which was beautiful. That was a stunning comic.
Yeah, and they connected these books also very early on. There was some tie-ins, and you had to buy all 3 of them. Those bastards.
Yeah, with the diamonds.
That came a little bit later, which was hideous.
Exactly. And here we have the rebooted Lois Lane. He's clearly going for a little bit Margaret Kidder here. That was at least my by the way of the 80s. This is also cool Lois. He was also now a hip happening woman of the early 80s. And Jimmy. I mean, it basically always comes down to his characters. This is the first meeting of Superman and Batman in Superman number 2, I believe. No, it's Man of Steel number 4. This is Man of Steel number 4. And Miller established that these characters don't like each other, and Byrne went with this because they are not really friends here. Which was to show, I mean, it makes sense. They haven't met before, so they're a little bit mistrusting of each other. And you can also see, going to the next page, Batman always has a plan. Because Superman cannot see through his costume. Of course he can't, because Batman already knows everything about Superman. This is also a little bit the what Snyder was riffing on, based on the Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Yeah, but why did I give Batman mad cancer? I mean, isn't that a lot of lead?
I don't know. Who knows?
I'm sure Batman is smart enough that there'd be some sort of. It's layers.
I think that's happening 2022 in the next Batman series written by Tom King. Batman has cancer. I think that's going to be. Oh, he already gave Batman cancer. He did.
Really?
Number 2. Yes, he did. He did. He already gave Batman cancer.
Who
yes,
did?
He killed Batman. Tom King. It's a Tom King comic. It's basically a story where Batman dies and Catwoman carries his ashes around or something like that. It's actually not that bad. It's quite okay. But here we go. And this is that is Lois Lane.
Oh, that's Lois. Okay.
And that's Lois. And this is very buff Clark Kent, because Byrne also does away with this weakling idea of Clark Kent. He's now a very buff guy. He's a yuppie of the 80s. He has a very fancy apartment. How he does afford that or he can afford that on his reporter salary, who knows? Maybe newspapers were selling better in those days. But he's working out. He's the guy. He played football.
Well, don't forget, yes, not only was he a football star at school, which again goes against the whole mythos of like Superman not showing off his powers and abilities and etc.
Yeah.
But he was an accomplished author, so that's probably where he got his novel royalties paid for the flat, paid for the apartment.
Remember that? Here we go. That's the explanation. Yeah, you see,
So he for life.
So Lois is no longer a trophy wife. He's on par with her. It's quite interesting fan fiction fantasy of John Byrne here.
Yeah, but it's that sort of thing of because if you're going to do away with the dynamic of Lois not really liking Clark Kent but having a crush on Superman, and that being a constant dynamic, this kind of does away with that. Now she can be drawn to both of them.
Yeah.
But it also removes another level of like, I think you've got it on a slide coming up, but it's around his secret identity. So
So do you think Lois asked Clark, every once in a while, hey, keep the suit on tonight, baby? You think?
We'll see. Yeah, but still, she's still the super sophisticated urbanite, and he's the guy from Kansas. So there's still a little bit of that in there. But it's a very Americanized version of it. If you go back to the Siegel and Schuster version, it's very, very different. Superman is very Jewish, and of course he is in the early issues, which I always find this so complicated when people say, oh, he's a Jesus character. He isn't. He's really the outsider. He's the immigrant coming to America.
Well, he's Moses.
Yeah, he's Moses, actually. And there we have his swank apartment, and everything is very cool, because it's the 80s. Everything needs to be very cool.
Yeah, look at him, right? He picked that.
Yeah.
Hey, look at that. He got his own little area to himself. His There's a very cocky Clark Kent over here, boy, trying to get the ladies.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and he's also he owns more than one blue suit. So here we go. And this is Lex. I mean, yes, and if you go back to the original Superman and Action Comics by Siegel and Schuster, that's how Lex Luthor looked when he first appeared. He had red hair. He was not bald. And he was not necessarily, I mean, he was also a scientist, but he was also a businessman. He was not really like the crazy guy with the purple green suit who was flying around. He was really a grounded guy.
Man. Like nowadays, they draw, Lex Luthor to be the equivalent of Superman in size and muscular strength, at least some interpretations. This is more realistic, This is a businessman,
I mean, look, if you're a successful businessman and a scientist, there's a good chance that you're not physically working out every day and hitting the gym for 4 hours every morning.
Yeah. He's basically Elon Musk.
Yeah.
I mean, you can also say he's modeled a little bit on Trump, because Trump was the guy in the 80s. A lot of people forget that.
Yeah.
I mean.
And just like Trump, Lex Luthor did achieve the president in Congress.
And he had a hair problem. Let's see the similarities here.
It's funny. It's funny. I do.
Cover. Yeah, love it.
No, I do. See, it's funny. I do remember all the chatter about when in the comics when Lex Luthor became president, everyone were going like, "Oh, that's unrealistic. No way, Lex Luthor will become president." Don't you love it?
But stranger things have happened. I mean, this is I never knew this. I did this when I did research for my book. There was a guy in the late 19th century. He became president, and then he lost. He won the popular vote, but he lost. He didn't have the electoral college, and so he lost to a Republican. And then he said, "Fuck it, I'm coming back." And he was re-elected 4 years later.
Right.
He's the only non-consecutive American president. Isn't that crazy? I mean, it's very cool. Who knows? Maybe Trump is coming back. Who knows? I mean, we can never know this.
He'll try.
He already said he wants to do it. He wants to try, but damn, again, you're gonna have somebody almost in their 80s run again. Stop it. We need some blood, please.
Yeah. Please have some younger folks doing it.
Please.
Yeah, this is Superman #1. This is the first issue. He's going off against Metallo, a very different Metallo.
Very different.
And I actually prefer the original Metallo origin story, where he's a cool cat who's making a play for Lois Lane. That's actually, and his kryptonite heart is a secret. I mean, this is very 80s, and this is very grim and gritty. And Superman also sports a 3D beard in his story. I mean, this is very much the slick of the 80s. We're talking about reboots that worked on or didn't work. And I was Dave. I really liked this when it came out because it was different. It was cool. It was fresh. It was like, if you were a kid of the 90s, this is comparable to the Image revolution. I mean, what DC was doing in the 80s is very much what the Image guys did in the 90s. That was simply cool, and it was interesting. But if you thought a little bit harder about it, a lot of the stuff was not so well written.
Well,
it was great.
It's the attempt. It was like, okay, well, we've got to make comics more realistic. So, okay, well, let's give Superman, for the first time ever, a 3-day growth.
Cool. I mean, what's the point? But at the end of the day, I mean, what it really wrecked is the history of the Legion of the Superheroes, and we will talk about the Legion of Superheroes on one of these shows. And because there was never a Superboy that was established, and so for some reason people thought, okay, if there's no Superboy, there can be no Legion of Superheroes, which is quite ridiculous. I mean, he influenced the Legion of Superheroes, but you still could have a Legion. But they said, okay, there's no Legion of Superheroes, even though he crossed paths with the Legion, but from a different timeline, obviously. But so they said, well, basically, we do where is the Legion because there's no Superboy. And we also can't have Supergirl. We have a Supergirl clone, but she's not really Supergirl because he really needs to be the only superhero, and he's the only Kryptonian. A lot of this obviously got revised and rebooted and retconned, but that was the original concept. And I mean, this is here getting Lex Luthor, and Lex Luthor is really getting menacing here. This is quite an interesting character, also.
Yeah, I think
he looks more.
I think John Byrne through as, and again, dearly love. I still think like he's done the second best Fantastic Four run in comics, etc.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely.
But I think he threw a massive big spanner in the works. I think, I think Supergirl was eventually appeared as a proto, as some sort
of sort of a clone of Matrix. They called her a Matrix. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. All of these little things, and it was, I can just imagine like the conversations were like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, man, that's cool. Awesome. And then it starts to lay it out, and they're going like, oh yeah, crap. Oh yeah, damn. We shouldn't have done that.
I think was it Paul Levitz who told the story, or somebody from DC told the story? He was with his daughter in some of the Warner parks, and there was a Supergirl, and he said, oh, Supergirl, I want to read some Supergirl comics. And he said, oh, we are not making those anymore. He said, oh, that's a big mistake. We should go back to Supergirl. And this is a great story. This is only the second issue, and this is Lex Luthor figures out Clark Kent's secret identity very early on, of Superman's secret identity. And this is also, I mean, this is the thinking of Byrne. This is actually quite clever, because they basically say, oh, he's the smartest man, he's the richest man, so naturally he will know who Superman is. I really like the spoiler warning. I really like the end of the Snyder Cut where Lex Luthor says, "Oh, I can tell you who Batman is. He's Bruce Wayne. Of course I know that." And here's Lex Luthor says, "Oh, he's Clark Kent," but he says, "I'm not believing it. It's a lie.
Yeah.
He's so powerful he would never be immortal." That makes no sense, because in his head, a guy like Superman would have no secret identity. Why would he have a secret identity?
Oh yeah, no, I think it was more from the context of not immortal or anything. It was just like, well, clearly in his head, if you're Superman 24/7. You don't need or want to be anybody else.
Exactly.
Why pretend you're inferior?
Yeah. And that is like Luthor, that works with his character. And then also Byrne brings in the New Gods, which also ties into Zack Snyder, interestingly enough. And yeah, that's John Byrne's version of the New Gods. How do you feel about those, Dave? Do you think he did justice to these characters?
Sorry?
Do you think he did justice to these characters?
At first I thought, like, I mean, he does. He, like, as you can see there, draws a wicked dark side. Like, I don't understand why so many artists can't draw him. I really don't. Yeah. But there's a wicked. His drawings of the New Gods great until he started doing a New Gods comic, and it was just. Yeah, it was pretty pictures, but I just lost interest. It's funny. I think it's I've never really. Yeah, I've just never. It's very rare that I've liked any anybody's full use of the New Gods, and bits and pieces were good. Like, like you look at this and you go, like, you can feel hopeful. Like, this is cool, but
if you go to the next page, you can see like a spread of the New Gods. Here, this is.
Yeah.
I mean,
that page looks great. That page looks great.
A very slick version of the New Gods. I mean, this is very slick.
I think if he'd sort of been in keeping with where maybe Jack was going, but it would be difficult because New Gods as a comic was started really as Orion of the New Gods. Yeah. And it was 4 books technically, laying out one story, and so trying to tell it in one comic might have been a little difficult. And but he gave it a good try. One of the better tries.
Yeah, I think so too. But nobody's Kirby, of course. I mean, and this is when people talking about Kirby couldn't write dialogue. I mean, I take Kirby's dialogue over Byrne's dialogue any time of the day, because Kirby's dialogue is interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. Like yesterday, I spent most of the afternoon. I was working, but I was listening to Wagner and his Ring Cycle, and it was. I kind of think that would be a great music to set to the New Gods. It's it's very like, and that's what I think of when I like Kirby's dialogue. It's I imagine, like Rider the Valkyries playing in the background.
Yeah, it's also the Nibelungen is also a very good blueprint for Game of Thrones, because basically it's the same. It's very much the same story, and it's very interesting. Okay, let's go to. Or do you want to jump in with your stuff, Dave? I mean,
No, keep going.
Okay. I picked the next oft rebooted character is Wonder Woman, even though people don't realize how often she has been rebooted. I mean, this is the original version. It's the first appearance. I believe the first appearance, at least the first cover appearance, and this is how she originally appeared. And you can have a long discussion about Wonder Woman, but the interesting thing is she was developed for a very simple reason, because at that time comic books had advisory panels. That was before the comic book code was established, but they already had some rumblings from parents in the 40s, and so they got advisors, an advisory panel, and these were educators. There was teachers, or they were Secretary of Education, whoever they could get to say, okay, these comics are really cool, you can give the kids these comics to read. And one of the advisors was William Moulton Marston, who was a psychologist. And he said, oh, basically, I have a pitch. Of course, I have a pitch for a female superhero. And this is Max Gaines, who said, oh, you have a female superhero, so she has big boobs, we can sell comic books. That's basically how Wonder Woman came about. And so he said, oh, it's even better, there's bondage. And hey. And so basically, the interesting thing about William Moulton Marston is he's credited with inventing the lie detector test. I mean, I'm not sure how credible this is. He had experiments with a lie detector sort of apparatus, and he was a psychologist. And he was interesting because he lived with 2 women, which eventually cost him his job as a professor, because people said, that's not that kind of kinky. That's good. Because he was married and he had a lover, a woman who was younger, but she was the lover of both of them. So, and he had this idea that women were stronger than men. And if you look at I know you're going to the New Frontier later, because I really love Dave, just jump in here with Darwin Cook's approach of Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is taller than the men. She is actually very powerful. She is very strong. And the idea that Wonder Woman is a victim is ludicrous. She isn't. She is an all-powerful goddess. And that's how the H.G. Peter drew her in the original comics. Mm. And this is a very warrior princess Wonder Woman. And she is leading the charge here. And she is leading the US Army. So talking about, oh, she's a victim. Nah, she isn't. And this is a very interesting character. And she always had these lessons in the comic books early on where she said, oh, kids, remember, gender equality. Mm. And that's the 1940s we're talking about here. And this is Ross Andrew. This is we're getting to the first reboot. That is the late 50s. Where they say, okay, Wonder Woman needs to be a little bit hipper. And this is when Ross Andrew comes. And a lot of people forget what a long career Ross Andrew had. I mean, he worked on this original Suicide Squad. He worked on Wonder Woman. He had a long career with DC Comics before he even came to Marvel. And some of his artwork is really good, actually. And this is the second reboot. That is Danny O'Neill gets hold of this character and says, oh, well, we don't need superpowers anymore. Let's do something completely different and put her in a white jumpsuit. Even though that's a very fashionable 60s. And this is the Jeff Jones covers I shared, because this is also from this period of time. I like these covers because they're interesting. Yeah. Mm. Mm-hmm.
This was more like a horror comic than anything.
Yeah, somebody said it's a cover for a horror anthology, and that's actually what it is. I mean, this is very much Jeff Jones doing his thing here. He's doing very interesting artwork here, and but it's also, I mean, if you go into say, okay, the covers are great, but it's Dick Giordano doing the artwork here, and this is some great. These are some great issues. Actually.
What you had, it's kind of like the what was it? What was the romance title? It was a horror one they had. Haunted House.
The Haunted Mansion. They had several. They had the Abandoned House and Haunted Mansion, because Gothic horror was making a big comeback at that time. Yeah,
those anthologies were very good sellers. Mm-hmm. So having comic covers, Wonder Woman having a cover that echoed those wasn't actually a bad idea.
No, not at all. Not at all.
But what was interesting about that previous issue is that was issue 200. Like, it's an anniversary issue, and it's not of Wonder Woman being strong. It's like, see that, we're so used to anniversary issues being something like lots of guest stars, American flags everywhere.
It's so interesting that when younger listeners might not know who Gloria Steinem is. She was the premier feminist in America at that time, in the late 60s, early 70s. So she was a journalist, and to give you an idea of what she did as a journalist, she went undercover in the Playboy Club as a Playboy bunny. Mm. And so she wrote an essay an expose about the Playboy Club. And she founded or co-founded Ms. magazine. And she put Wonder Woman in her original costume on the cover and said, okay, this is what Wonder Woman looks like. And who are you, Danny O'Neill, taking your powers away? And since this day, Danny O'Neill, I think he apologized in every interview about what he did there. It was an interesting idea. It was in line with what he did with Superman. He also that was his idea. He wanted to break his characters. He was the original Alan Moore in many ways.
I would have liked to have seen her become that same sort of character, but with her powers, like not depower her, but just she's send her off on a different path. The president comes to her and says, "We need you to be a secret agent for a year."
Yeah, it would be interesting. I mean, this is once she gets her powers back, and this is a more traditional looking Wonder Woman going up against Hephaestus here. I mean, this is mixing in the Greek mythology, a little bit light Greek mythology here, and this is the sort of Wonder Woman we see in the early 40s and in the early 70s. This is also interesting. When the TV show happened, then there was another reboot because we moved away from Super Wonder Woman in the 70s because the TV show was in the first 2 seasons was set in the 1940s. So this was now Wonder Woman in the 1940s. We're following the adventures of Wonder Woman of Earth 2 all of a sudden because that lines up with the television show.
Right.
And what we get is a very interesting looking comic book here where she fights the Justice League. So it all goes in full circle. Justice Society, it all goes in full circle. Great artwork by Mike Nesser, by the way, here. And this is very interesting. This is Wonder Woman taking on the whole Justice Society. This is her revenge for being a secretary. So she beats these guys into the ground, basically.
And that's a cheap shot right there, bro. The Herb. Yeah,
no, the idea of one of the guys just coming at her from behind, like.
But she's having none. But she's having none of it. She's having none of it. She mows those guys down. I mean, this is very much. This is the other reboot I wanted to talk about. The often forgotten Roy Thomas, Gene Colan reboot from the early 80s, because that was before George Paris. And this was the idea to say, okay, we make Wonder Woman a little bit more different. We move her more to the Greek mythology. We have the Greek gods middling into her affairs again. And actually, I really like the Gene Colan reboot, the Roy Thomas reboot. This is, by the way, also part of this. This is a little artwork here by our friend Keith Given, doing his Kirby interpretation. I really like these. This is only a couple of issues, like 20 issues. Roy Thomas clearly wanted to do more with the character. I don't know why this ended. And this is a little insert shared here. This is Mike Kaluta. And this would also have been an interesting artist for Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen someone like Mike do even just a graphic. Not even hell, do him now.
Yeah.
Get him to do it now. Have him do Wonder Woman. Have it said. Period.
Can you imagine a graphic novel like the book he did on the Shadow with Rossi's? I mean, geez, gorgeous book. Well, and then we come to 1987, and this is George Paris gets hold of this character. I mean, people also forget. I mean, when you talk about the 80s, the other big superstar artist was George Paris, and fantastic artist, great man, big shout out. And he did wonderful work with Wonder Woman, no pun intended. But this is just the cover for the first issue, and there's a naked Wonder Woman. That's not Wonder Woman. That's her mother. Just imagine doing this today. I mean, ugh. I can hear them cry, and this is just the first page here. I mean, this is George Paris. I mean, it's such great art here. I mean, and this is basically centered around the gods. I mean, this is not the new gods. This is the gods of Greek myth, and George Paris took this and ran with it. The first story is Wonder Woman fighting Ares, and she's not fighting Ares directly. She's fighting the two. It's Phobos and the other guy. The brothers who are the henchmen of Ares, and Ares only comes in at the end of the story, which is the way it should be. And he comes to a very cool conclusion, which we will get to in a minute. This is Pat Broderick, by the way, inking here. This is not Paris himself. And what he did is he did away with the young, handsome Steve Trevor. If you go to the next page again, and we see a very old, grizzled, no, he's not really that old, he's in his late 40s, I would reckon, early 50s maybe. He is the old Steve Trevor. He is the worn-out war hero who hasn't learned how to kiss ass. That's basically who he is. And the whole idea of Wonder Woman with her love interest, it falls like there. And once again, great art by George Paris. The whole first 30, 40 issues are really fantastic looking books.
Yeah.
And this is the interesting thing. What does Ares want? Of course, it's the height of the nuclear arms race. So he wants to have the guys in America and Russia start a nuclear war. I mean, that's what you do when you're the god of war. That's what you're going for. And as I said, the ending is quite amazing, because what happens in the end is, this is the cover of the final issue of this arc. This is issue number 6. And you think about what Patty Jenkins did. This is much more interesting, because Wonder Woman tells Ares basically, if everybody dies, nobody will worship you anymore, and there can be only one conclusion: everybody will die. So stop this nonsense. And he says, "Oh, I never figured that out. I'm leaving everything as is." So they end the book in a conversation. I mean, this is absolutely brilliant. I absolutely love this. And this is more or less the last page. The guy is about to start the rocket, and then Ares says, "Well, forget about it. Men is on their own. They can destroy themselves if they want to. I have no hand in this." And he just leaves. I mean, this is brilliant. This is brilliant storytelling. And this is just the 7th issue. I mean, this artwork is so gorgeous. It's unbelievable. Okay, I think this is my last slide.
Yeah, that was the last. Now we're gonna go to Davey. Wepa.
No commercial break.
You want a commercial break? Oh my God, everybody wants to pee and take a shit or something real quick, folks.
No, you can go if you don't have a commercial break.
No, you know what? I got you guys. I want you to go and check out. Oh yeah.
See,
well,
I'm going to keep
right
mine
now.
short.
They're actually. Yeah, they're going to record. Okay, they're going to record today. It's an awesome show called The Old Timers, and check out that.
Do you want to find out what makes the professor do his happy dance? Check out the Old Timers Comic Book Show, only on the UCPN.
There you go. Excellent.
That was a nice short one right there. Yeah, Bordeaux hat.
Hey,
He had me going like this. I was doing this.
yeah, we need to record our own. We need to record our own commercial here. You want to learn more about comics.
Dave wants his own country song now. What would you consider European country music? Is there anybody? Is the thing?
I suppose. Every country has their own music, and I think folk music kind of encompasses a lot of different countries. But none of which I'm really into.
Okay, so that means I won't find an intro. All right, let's dig it.
Well, something by the Chieftains, maybe. I like some of the Irish music.
All right, let's see.
Okay.
Let's see. All right, fine. Yeah, look at that. All right, Dave, set it off, brother. This is a team that has gone through multiple damn changes in time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think. So, obviously, like the Avengers, Marvel's Justice League, and like that, it was like, oh, let's put our greatest heroes all together in one book. And they kind of reverse things a little bit from the way DC did it. Because if you, like, straight off the get-go, like, Marvel put all their top, like, oh, okay, well, Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, Hulk. I mean, that was most half their characters actually were in there. But unlike DC, what they did is like they changed their minds as they went along. We're like, hold on a second, maybe we're giving too much attention to these, like Thor and Iron Man. And let's keep them in their own books, and let's bring some other characters in who don't merit their own titles, but we can keep using them. We can build them up. We can give them background characters. So if we start sorry, Al, are you going to sleep, mate? Are you asleep there, Al?
No, I'm not asleep.
I saw you rubbing your eye. I was like, oh.
No, I got
What's going on? What's going on?
Are we boring you, Al? Are we boring
Is that a bad night story? Oh wait, Scarlet Witch is coming up in a second. So pay attention. Pay attention.
Yes. So come on, if we can have the next slide, please.
Just saying about the Avengers.
No.
It's just that they were never my favorite team, in comics, just because, as what you mentioned, the consistency of change, and there was nothing there that I like to, if I want to read a team book, I want the team to stay a while or whatever. But there was this constant change, and everybody could be an Avenger. This is what kind of turned me off to them. But this OG team, I wouldn't think much of it when I would have seen it. Cap. I wasn't a big fan of this suit of Iron Man.
I love that one. I love the one with the
Yeah, I think the book hit its stride when the first lineup changed. We will get there. But this is the first issue. Very cool issue, actually. This is very much against Loki. This is the first Avenger movie.
Yeah, and it basically they kept, it is the first movie all in one issue. And they kept to it. But it was that idea of that the Justice League, like, let's put a bunch of characters that we know into the title, and let's start having them interact, which is a good way of keeping your characters out, considering that probably at this point all of these other characters were, Thor didn't have his own mag as such at the time. It was Journey into Mystery. Iron Man, there was no Iron Man comic at the time. And I think Hulk might have been the only character. Like he had a short run with his own.
He had 6 issues.
It was cancelled. And Ant-Man and Giant Man and the Wasp start also in an anthology book. So basically, they also were in one of these anthology titles.
Yeah, and they all had. And when they first started, there was backup stories. So it was, eventually, of course, Iron Man and Captain America shared a comic. The Hulk and Giant Man shared a comic, and Thor had sort of horror and science fiction backup stories. So it's odd, but again, it's a great way of putting, exposing your characters a little bit more. You're getting to see them more.
They were also still very much experimenting at that time, which makes it a very cool period.
And the characters were relatively unexposed. Whereas, I would have, when you think about the Justice League, I would have probably not wanted, and it's just the way I think editorially, I wouldn't have wanted to use Superman and Batman either, because I would have thought they were overexposed. They've already got 3 titles each a month. You had Batman, Detective, Brave and Bold. I know when Justice League started, it wasn't quite. It was in Brave and Bold. It wasn't quite Batman every issue.
Still 2 books for each Superman and Batman. You're totally right.
And then Superman was the same. It had World's Finest, which was also at the time was Superman and Batman before it became Superman and somebody else.
Yeah.
So they were overexposed. So I would have gone for Justice League as a great way of okay, well, you're reading Flash, you should really be should read Green Lantern as well, or should be reading Aquaman as well. So that would have been a great way of sort of pushing people onto each other's books.
Yeah, and it holds a lot of water, because a lot of young kids who would turn into comic professionals, they said, well, basically that was the book you got in addition to your favorite character, because your favorite character was in this book. Yeah,
exactly. But I think that the Avengers and Justice League ran into similar problems, as if we go on with the next couple of slides, you'll see that Cap joins. Nice addition, bring him back. We've had Submariner introduced in the Fantastic Four. Now he's in the Avengers.
Not the same one from Winter Soldier, but yeah.
Well, technically he is, but he's not quite the same character. But it's, but again, the cast is growing, and it's everyone teaming up against. But this is the cover that okay, well, off goes Thor and Iron Man and Giant Man, and now it's okay, Cap's there, and he's going to put together a new team.
And that's the interesting thing. Why I hope you don't mind that I jump in. But I think one of the reasons Stan gave for this was basically it became too complicated to track the continuity of the characters he was using in the other books. Versus DC never had any issues with continuity, but Marvel always had these panels. Oh, you see the Hulk here, but remember he was also doing this at the same time. But it got very complicated at a certain point in time if you had these characters in the Avengers as well.
Yeah, I think that DC's attitude was, if you're going to use a character, make sure he stays in character. Like,
yeah,
if Superman shows up in your book, you can't change him in any way that's going to affect his books, things like that. Whereas what Stan was doing, because he had less titles, he was trying to navigate something where it was like, he really wanted to go like, oh, well, this issue happened between these two other issues. Like, he was trying to keep track of everything. Everything was taking place, you know, in a sort of he had a real time,
like a daily continuity, a timeline.
Yeah, he was trying to track everything. He wanted like this and this, and you know, you'd see a lot of editorial little boxes like see Tales of Suspense issue such and such, see Avengers number such and such. All of those little editorial reminders to send you back to read those.
The original internal linking.
Yeah,
that's
and
all.
here was and again, it was, we'd been introduced to a couple of these characters earlier. Hawkeye had been introduced in Iron Man, so let's introduce them in. Now, I remember this issue as apart from the fact it was just a fantastic 3-issue arc by Barry Smith.
Oh, fantastic art.
Yeah, it was gorgeous. And this kind of like, this was a great, like, this really ended the 100. This is, see, when you talk about an anniversary issue, like this was issue 100. Look at that cover. Like, great. Barry Smith drawing all the, it's amazing.
And this is Barry Smith going full Barry Winston Smith, because the art was already on a peak there.
Yeah, but there's a
that's Hawkeye.
That's Hawkeye. Yeah.
Damn, they had him like this too. Poor guy. That's the worst costume ever.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I think it was a couple of issues.
I mean, talking about women showing too much skin. I mean, Hawkeye said, "I can hold my beer. I can do that too."
Yeah, I mean, you know, really, there's like, you shouldn't be objecting to it, because, as you say, if you can have Wonder Woman dressed that way, why can't a guy be dressed that way? But
I'm not objecting to it like that. That's just a messed up suit for Hawkeye.
But the thing about this particular issue, and there's a great establishing, like a double-page spread in here of all the Avengers, everyone that's ever been an Avenger is there, and I think that was, for me, was that
every hero in Marvel.
Yeah, I mean, even at its 100th issue already, you've used way too many characters already. Too many characters already, like, you know, I'm an Avenger. I haven't been in the issue for 50 issues. I haven't been in any story for 50 issues, but I'm an Avenger. Big cast.
But what you also see is the major difference between Danny O'Neill and Roy Thomas, because Danny O'Neill was really not interested in writing comic books. He was more a journalist who used comics as a platform. Sounds familiar, but he was the original platformer. He used comics to talk about political agendas. And Roy Thomas was a comic book fan. He was one of the first comic book fans turned pro. And of course, he would have every Avenger in a shot. I mean, that's what a comic fan does.
Exactly. He was writing for. He was a fan writing for fans. Probably the first fan writing for fans.
Yeah.
And again, here we have another issue. Just 50 issues later, it's like,
I'm sure there was one between another one asking for a new lineup. I swear to God, every damn issue was new lineup. Like, all right, enough.
Almost every year, it was like, okay, the new lineup. Who's going to be in and who's going to be out? Because they realized, like, there was. I mean, fine, if you've got George Perez on the book, you're fine, but most other artists can't handle drawing 50 characters an issue.
Yeah.
So it would have been nice if the Avengers had stayed to like a smaller, you know, core group, and just and you just called on the main ones. Now we're talking about. Well, now we're getting onto the fact that we're
Can
talking
you
about.
Can you go back a second? Because it was also interesting about this is Stan set the precedent, but also Steve Englehart ran with this. You could have villains on the team because he had Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver and Hawkeye on the team, and these were villains originally, and they could redeem themselves. And here later you got on the Steve Englehart, you got the Swordsman on the team, who was also originally introduced as a villain. I mean, this is a very groundbreaking concept. I mean, the idea of good and evil is moving here, and it's very interesting. It's the 70s. It's the idea of the anti-hero. What is good? What is bad? I mean, this is interesting.
Oh yeah, Yellow Jacket, who was like originally Hank Pym. It's like turned bad, but now obviously we're talking about reboots. So with Marvel, they decided like, okay, let's set up a new universe, and basically the Avengers are called the Ultimates there, but it's a reboot of the Avengers, and I think probably the first two graphic novels they did with Brian Hitch and Frank Cho, with Mark Millar were exceptional. There was a couple of weak points, I would say.
Yeah, but if you go back, you will see how much Mark Millar ripped on Warren Ellis' The Authority. I mean, this is very much a reboot of The Authority.
Mark had followed Warren on The Authority, so it's kind of.
I know. Yeah, makes sense. But the first story arc is very similar to or the second story arc actually is very similar to what Warren Ellis did on The Authority.
But again, I would say. But I would say the issue here was yes, we got to see Tony Stark in bed with 2 or 3 women. He's still drinking martinis. You've got Hank Pym back as being abusing women again. He beating up Janet Pym again, which I thought was always. I mean, even Jim Shooter acknowledges that was a mistake. Yeah, and to just reinforce it, I just thought was really sad. But it also ran into the same problems I feel that Man of Steel did, which is, yes, the first 2 books, that whole setup with Loki, which obviously became, they took 2 graphic novels to tell you what Jack Kirby did in 1 issue. But it was still, it was beautiful art. And it served the crux. It served as the backbone of the film launch. But I think like John Byrne's Superman reboot, there were some inherent weaknesses that, like, okay, well, where do we go now? Yeah. And it would have been great if Mark and Brian were, say, had been given the opportunities to not do floppies, to not do periodicals, but to go straight in and do, like, okay, give us an Ultimates Avengers graphic novel, and then when you're ready, do a next one, and then you're ready to do a next one, and you build it up like that. But the inherent flaw of having to produce something on a monthly or near monthly basis is a problem that affects quality, because at some point you've got to either you either have to have delays. You've got to say, well, okay, well, issue 6 is 3 months late, or you've got to put something else in its place. Yeah.
I mean, in defense of these modern artists, where you will always say, oh, Kirby did 10 books at the same time. Yeah, but look at how detailed the art has become over years. I mean, Brian Hitch art is very detailed, and I can understand that he couldn't finish a book in a month. I mean, there's so many details.
He should never have been asked to be. Yeah. I don't think that we've come far enough along now that there's nothing wrong with having someone like Brian Hitch working on a title where, it's like, okay, well, do what you can. Try and, if you can hit 3 pages a week, great. But once you've got the book finished, then we'll solicit and then we'll publish. But overall, I thought, as reboots go, I thought the Ultimates was overall, I thought it was, at least initially, was was very good.
I remember liking it. I remember liking
Oh
it.
yeah,
I liked it a lot. Yeah, I liked it a lot.
I think it was
And
one of.
there's no denying. I mean, Mark Millar was ahead of his time when he made Black Fury a black guy. I mean, there's no denying.
Well, I mean, you know, again, it's one of the things that Mark did. He originally did it with
Samuel Jackson.
No, that was the other. There was a what was his other comic that turned into a movie?
Kick-Ass?
No. Before that one, the one before that. The one where he'd modeled the lead character on Eminem.
Wanted.
That's it.
Wanted,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Great movie. Great.
So
I like
he'd
that.
already. Yeah, but but again, you know, I also know how writer and art teams work. So again, it might not necessarily have been Mark. I'm sure they've done interviews. It could well easily have been Brian Hitch who decided to just start drawing Samuel Jackson in as Nick Fury.
Makes sense. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about this in a couple of weeks when we talk about Miracle Man, Marvel Man.
I always like this character.
Yeah, so this is my next choice for reboot. You know, it was very interesting that, like, I remember being a kid and picking this up, and I was like, great, Marvel's producing a comic, you know, just for us in the UK, and it's Captain Britain, and it never really occurred to me at the time because I was a kid. It never really hold on, why didn't you get an American writer, a British writer and a big British artist to do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
But you know, it was Herb Trimp, and it definitely kept Herb Trimp employed for quite a while.
Good.
Before it switched to, I think John Buscema did several issues.
Mm.
He came in and did several issues, and then loads of covers by Ron Wilson.
Mm.
Man, those are the ones available in the UK that you got, because obviously these covers are not familiar to me.
Yeah, no, these were all. Yeah, this came out in the UK, and
yeah,
you know, it was like, yeah, it was our own British Marvel, and like, we've got something you guys don't. So, but it was still lots of.
I mean, but it's also interesting. At the same time, you had Warrior magazine and these kinds of magazines that were really interesting and very, very off kilter.
Yeah,
very fascinating.
Yeah, you had Warrior, and then later on you had Deadline. But you know, again, this is, you know, it was nice. It was classic Herb Trimp, very American style artwork, but a British character.
I like the suit. This has always been my favorite Captain Britain suit.
I liked it, but I did like the second one, the one that came next.
This one.
Yeah.
He looks so, you know what I mean? He does look badass. I'm not going to front. You know what I mean? Is this the first appearance in this rebooted suit, if you will?
Well, that's the trade. No, that's the trade cover. That's the trade cover for the first trade they did. And when it was colored as well, because it was originally in black and white. It was
just look at the talent here, Alan Davis. I mean, this is top tier talent.
Oh yeah, but remember at the time it wasn't it wasn't. Oh wow, we're going to pinch him off DC from doing something. No, he hadn't. When Alan Moore started work on Captain Britain, Alan Davis started work on Captain Britain. Neither one of them had started work on Marvel Man or Miracle Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, neither one. Like Alan had not done Outsiders. This was literally Alan Davis's first Marvel work, was drawing those first Captain Britain stories, but not with Alan Moore, with a writer called Simon Thorpe. And then eventually Alan took over. So Alan wasn't completely responsible for the reboot of Captain Britain. It was somebody else. And, you know, and as someone who knows both people, Alan Davis, and as Alan has proved very much himself, he is very much an ideas man. He is like Alan Moore and Alan Davis in this instance. I would equate very similar to Chris Claremont and John Byrne, in that when they did X-Men, it was Chris Claremont was definitely riffing off John Byrne's ideas and his input. And I can tell you the same would be for Captain Britain. And Alan Davis proved that when he took over the writing shortly.
Look at that.
That's some amazing slick artwork here. Very cool.
Yeah. Well, Daredevils was, again, a monthly comic where it was Captain Britain was 10 pages. Frank Miller's Daredevil was like 10 pages, 10, 12 pages. It was all broken up. They had a couple.
Is it 50p? It's a 50p. I mean, that's a magazine, right?
Yeah, and it was magazine format. It had articles, reviews, a few editorial features.
Very cool. And this was your first team, UK team?
Well, that was a team called the Special Executive that appeared in Captain Britain.
Very British sounding name.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, look at this cover.
So this was the first cover to Daredevils. And obviously, because, even though Captain Britain was a new strip, the only originated strip in there, Daredevil obviously takes main focus because it's called Daredevils. And, the artwork for that cover is by Paul Neary. And trying to go Frank Miller on the look and feel of the artwork there. But it's a really nice piece of art. But again, we're now entering the terrain of it's very much British creators taking over what was an American created strip over supposedly a British character. And it's Captain Britain would not have been out of place in a magazine like Warrior. Because it didn't read like an American comic. Its sensibilities weren't that of an American comic. And the way it handled the actual characters and the outcome for those stories was definitely something that hadn't been seen in American comics. So, I mean, if anybody is there and they've not got round to reading, like if they've read Watchmen, and League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and everything else that Alan's done, but haven't read Captain Britain, it really is a great read.
Sounds good, yeah.
And if you read the collected...
UK.
No, if you read the whole, there is actually a sort of an omnibus edition out there. And it contains all the originals. So it's the original writer, Simon Thorpe, then Alan Moore's, Alan Davis writing, and I've just blanked on Jamie Delano. Yes, Jamie Delano wrote it for a while as well.
Oh, cool.
Really good. Really worth read.
Ooh, look at the interiors there.
Yeah, like this character they created called the Fury that was absolutely unstoppable, could absolutely adapt to any opponent at all, and would literally instantly rebuild itself to fight anybody. The female character on this page here in the British costume is actually Captain UK. So
Captain UK.
Yeah, there was because they also had a multiverse, and there was lots of Captain Britons in different universes, and in some universes it was Captain Britain, it was Captain UK, and from this this particular universe, it was Captain UK was a female.
That's an interesting first appearance to go after. Do you know what it is?
It was in Daredevils, but this is the color issue. I don't know what this particular issue is.
It's an interesting speculative pickup because I know there's always been talks of a female Captain Britain, so kind of taking place a homie.
Well, as you can see from the format of the page, it was actually done for the magazine, which would probably been Daredevils or the Captain Britain monthly magazine. But yeah, it's it was such a great strip, and again, it was very much. Yeah, I won't say it's Alan Moore's Captain Britain. It's Alan Moore, very much Alan Moore, Alan Davis's, to a lesser extent, I suppose, Simon Thorpe and Jamie Delano.
It feels very 80s.
Yeah, these panels are awesome. And then she goes kick some ass right now. Like, get your hands.
But it was, for me, I mean, it was definitely like when you talk about reinventions, reboots, this was definitely like up there. This was like one of, to me, it's one of the best.
Thank you for this one. I gotta read. Oh man, homie, big homie right here.
Well, I only put him in there because it was a tease for, but again, we are talking about reboots, and again, one of the ultimate reboots is Marvel Man.
Yeah. As I said, listeners, that's your homework for the next 2 weeks, because next week we will talk about this character.
Yep.
And this is, if you haven't read the 24 issues, I mean, go on it, get on it, read them.
Yep. And I got a couple on sale on eBay if you want to collect them. You know, the periodicals. I mean, I say the other F word.
So when you say you've got them for sale, are they the originals or are they the Marvel reprints?
The Eclipse. I got the Eclipse joints. The Eclipse issues.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
cool. I had a couple of those.
Yeah, very nice, man. Near mint, beautiful. I think I got the when Moore took over issue.
Yeah, such a
the
great
issues. Oh, yeah.
Yep.
All right. So he re-included image from earlier.
Yeah, I mean, like when Chris himself originally talking, Chris was going to focus more on sort of Flash and Wonder Woman, and I was thinking, well, I'll cover Justice League.
The League itself.
Because again, it's like it was that thing of like, I think looking back, like Brave and Bold was such a great little title for me. So many great, like whether it's the Viking Prince, Suicide Squad, all of those. It was just some great stuff. And of course, when Batman took the main slot, there was such a good run of Neil Adams and Jim Aparo art.
It's also such a great time capsule. And if you go back, I mean, if you talk about the original team on Suicide Squad, I mean, this is all the guys are astronauts, are pilots, and the girl on the team is a nurse. I mean, she's not even a doctor; she's a nurse, but she looks pretty. I mean, this is we go back and you look at history and you see how far we have moved from that. But it's interesting. I find that utterly fascinating.
Yeah.
And you're going to talk about this, and Darwin Cook made such a good use of the Suicide Squad in the New Frontier.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's so just as the Justice League was a reboot, the Justice Society, I felt that of those reboots, particularly early on, I felt it was a particularly good one. You know, it was like I was a fan of Green Lantern and Aquaman, Flash. So having them all together, I got to admit, when I was young, like my reading material at first depended on what my mum would bring home for me. So my mum would bring me.
Me too. I'm not gonna laugh. I did the same shit. Because my mom would be sometimes like, if you okay, I'm gonna go out, just watch your brother, and if you're good, I'll bring you a comic. I'm like, all right. And then she would just
my mom
pick
would
whatever.
just bring. Yeah, she just picked me some up. She would just go, oh, I know you like Batman and Superman, so here I've got your Superman comic, a Batman comic, and a World's Finest or something. And so every now and again,
they was such a little good
boy.
Yeah,
it'd be like, oh, I couldn't find you Superman and Batman. So there's this guy called the Flash, and there's this guy called Green Lantern. It's like, oh, cool. And of course, back then it didn't matter that I wasn't, they were all done in one issue, so it doesn't really matter that you hadn't read the previous issues or anything. It was just like, oh, cool, great, I'd read it. Yeah, because I think it was by the time I discovered the Justice League itself, it was like a special they did with 2 issues in one. So it was like, wow, this is great.
I just want to say, bro, the placement of the laser here is just not very kosher.
Oh, but they were more innocent times. No one used to think like that.
I know.
But I always thought, see, so this is issue 1's cover, and it's just, when you think about the Avengers #1 cover, and then you look at this one, it's like you've got Flash playing chess. I mean, it's like, it's an interesting cover, and I like the cover. But for a #1, like, here it is, #1 of a new title, Justice League of America, and the villain, who's never been seen before, is playing chess with.
Yeah, but in all fairness, the first Brave and Bold cover, it's very Kirby-esque in the way that it's done. It's very reminiscent of the Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four #1 is very reminiscent of this one.
Well,
the Stereo cover.
Well, that second one reminded me of kind of the Challenges of the Unknown, where they'd fight the big giant robots, like Ultivac would be in there. So, so this one kind of this is like a 3rd issue cover. Like, this is, so it was a weird one.
You know, even though they aren't here, they're there as chess pieces, soups and bats.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's like, I always wanted to see the issues. I always wanted to see, like, they should redraw the issues that took place between those, where Superman and Batman were on the mission with them. But this one, they've retold this origin a couple of times.
Yeah,
and they kept it faithful for till up until about the 90s, I think, when they completely did away with it. But up until about the 90s, it was still, yes, these are the founding members of the Justice League. Superman and Batman weren't in those founding, and I think they found a way to introduce them into it in the late 90s, early noughts. But and then again, we saw these in Chris's presentation. It was like crossing over, and it was like, but this is what but again, it's expanding. We're expanding who's in contact with the Justice League. So again, those rotors, like, again, you're getting to that point where the world needed George Perez to be able to handle any of these sort of team ups. It was like, it just wasn't fair on artists otherwise. But it was fun though. It's like that whole, like, because of course, we've got Earth 1, Earth 2. Okay, we've had a couple of team ups. What do we do next? Hey, what about Earth 3? Okay, let's go for it. Yeah, this is the one that kind of started it. Yeah, this was the classic one.
And it's funny though, if you look, a spectacular story that is sure to become a classic. They even knew.
They knew it. And
they were hoping.
Yeah, but if you go to the second season of The Flash, which I really actually enjoyed, and they go to Earth 2, I mean, that's interesting. I never expected to see that on television.
Yeah, right. They try to replicate the scene over here really quickly.
Yeah.
Because again, the thing you don't realize, the thing you never realize as a kid is there's an adult watching that, looking at that cover, going, "Oh, that's the Flash I remember."
Yes.
Yeah.
And talk about old school looking teams. Seven Soldiers of Victory, bro.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And again, it was like, well, it was for them. It was just I think one of the things they'd established with the Justice Society is like, well, they like, the readers like these characters. So what about all those other characters? Can we use them? Like, if we start using them in stories, will people want us to do more stories with them? Are they like Marvel did? Marvel brought back Captain America. They used the Human Torch in the Fantastic Four. They brought Submariner back as well. So this is DC, I think, figuring out, let's bring some of these back, see if they've got any legs to them.
Yeah.
Because even like the Vigilante, you know, they tried a few miniseries with him. They tried updating him. I think he was living in Las Vegas. There was a nice miniseries by Tony Salmons, I remember. That looked really nice.
He also showed up in 2 issues as a guest star in Justice League early on in the 70s numbers.
Yeah. But again, like, you know, see, this see, again, this is an anniversary issue. This is how to do an anniversary issue. Like, I once suggested to one of who was it? It wasn't Dan DiDio, someone up at DC. I said, look, do a really nice job of reprinting this book, oversized, hardback. It's got all the top artists that everyone loves at their peak. Like, you know,
not lying.
You know, do this as a special keepsake book. It'd be like I'd buy one.
I mean, I keep hearing from Marvel professionals and DC professionals that they say, okay, these facsimile books we're putting out, these reprint issues, the way they were originally printed, they're selling gangbusters.
Yeah, well, they're good. I mean, you know,
that's what it is. Very simply said, folks. Right?
Yeah, I mean, but like something like this was great. But
I mean,
looking back at
that would outsell anything that's on the newsstands right now. I mean, if you put that out there, this shows. I mean, this is all because said it.
Well, of course you would, because you'd have everybody like me who I like literally like I don't know what's going on. And if you gave me a Justice League comic today, I wouldn't know who's good, who's bad, who's who. Like, I think the interesting thing about that we've seen in comics over the years is, like, if my father never read comics, but if he had, he would still, if he'd been reading Batman when he was a kid, he would be able to recognize the Batman I liked. It would be drawn. It'd be drawn differently. The stories would be slightly different, but he'd be able to recognize Batman. I don't think I could recognize Batman anymore. And I think a lot of it stems from something that Chris made a good point earlier, is a lot of the DC characters never really, outside of Superman, never really had strong supporting casts.
No.
And Batman's supporting cast are all characters that have their own books. It's 3 Robins, 3 other Batmen, Catwoman, Harley Quinn. This is his supporting cast, and the only person in his supporting cast who didn't have his own book got killed.
Yeah. But he has a TV show.
Yes, I go figure that one. I just included this because I thought it'd be nice to see the original art. So.
Oh, god damn, it looks so much better. There's more detail into the cities too. Good shit, bro. Oh yeah. But again, I think Justice League, now this reboot, I loved. Because when you think about it, like the Justice League book up until here, when they had characters like Vibe, actually, I can't even remember, Red Tornado. Justice League Detroit, it was Vibe, Vixen, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, I like that book was just I didn't know, like, I was like, who's buying this book? But when this came along, it was such a breath of fresh air. It was completely different. And it was brilliant, and I loved it. And again, I think the only fault I've had with this is the fact the editors decided that, wow, it's such a good seller, we have to have more of it. And it was
International Europe. What was it?
There was 3 titles in the end. There was Justice League, International, and Europe, and it just needed one. It just one. Keep one title, keep it good, and keep it running. And it was great. Keith Giffen, J.M. DeMatteis, and Kevin Maguire, then Adam Hughes. Great stuff. And then, of course, my favorite reboot, my favorite ever DC reboot, is A New Frontier.
Yeah, such a fantastic book.
I mean, I would have used New Frontier as like, I'd have just used that as a whole reset. Like, give me an entire line of books based off Darwin Cook's New Frontier. Have that as
Yeah.
He handled every character so well.
Yeah.
Wow, look at that, gorgeous.
Yeah, it was also, he was paying tribute to a lot of artists that influenced him. The whole Green Lantern story is very much based on Harvey Kurtzman. It's very much a Harvey Kurtzman war comic. And it's very much in gratitude of a lot of these artists. And a lot of that stuff is based in reality and the time it was going on at the time. It's the kind of Justice League story they couldn't tell in the early 60s.
Yeah.
It's tied into historical events, and it's quite amazing.
Yeah. He synthesized everything. They all fit in so well. And again, the idea of Wonder Woman being this much bigger, sort of broader, like,
Amazon.
But a far cry from Gal Gadot. I mean, I think she's been a pretty good Wonder Woman, but I think that Darwin Cook's Wonder Woman would be like, I think the
actress physically fit enough, on that level. But I mean, physically fit enough that could do it, that we know of, that'll attract the attention necessary, for Wonder Woman.
Would that be the lady? Would that be the lady Lucasfilm just fired?
Oh yes.
Oh
yes.
Yeah. Oh. Well, you know what? Yeah, kind of good, but too controversial right now. Unfortunate.
Obviously.
I mean,
obviously,
it's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But it would have been fun. Actually, it would be fun to see a Wonder Woman on screen like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like doing a movie version. If they decided, like, in fact, here, if anyone from Warner Brothers ever sees this, just do a movie, a live action version of New Frontier. Do it as a HBO Max series.
Oh wow!
True.
That was so cool.
How did you feel about that?
I mean, it's already there. You don't need a screenplay. I mean, it's already written. It's already laid out for you. It's just as a storybook for you. Do it as a 12-part miniseries, and you will be golden. I mean, this is already there. Everything is already there.
Yeah.
How'd you feel about the animated translation of this?
I actually liked it. I was surprised that I liked it that much. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think it'd be nice. Like one of the things that they could do now is, it'd be nice for them to sort of maybe readapt it as animation and do it as a HBO Max series that's longer and still keep it in as close to Darwin Cook's art style as possible.
Yeah,
I'm feeling that, like, every time I see a DC animation trailer, like, I just saw the trailer for Halloween, the Long Halloween part 1. And again, it's like, it doesn't look like it's going for the look of Tim Sale's art. It could have.
Right.
There's a more of a generic. This is how we animate at DC now. It's this style.
It was clean, like thick line look and all that. It looks like animation, which I appreciate. I think you can't beat DC right now in animation. Period. Marvel could try. They could do it only in movies. Marvel, they cannot do it in animation. DC is boss in animation, hands down. I mean, even with the JSA World War II coming up, did you guys see that trailer?
Yeah, but you can always stylize it a little bit more. It looks too generic. If you go back to the original Batman animated show, it was very stylized. It was riffing on the Fleischer cartoons, and then it's very stylized. And if you look at the most recent, I tried to watch the Justice League and what was it, Legion of Superheroes movie. I turned it off because the artwork was so unappealing, the animation was so unappealing because it was so generic. It was so boring looking.
That's a story to one day, the Fleischer Studio story, because that was an insane story. I don't know if you guys seen the documentary.
Yeah.
Oh, I know the story.
Yeah, it was insane. I was in my mind. I was
How
like, whoa.
you trick customers to get an order?
You ain't lying, bro.
Isn't Yeah, you got like 20 people from the street and say, okay, look busy when the guys come in from DC. Look busy. We have a lot of orders going here.
Yeah. Mother effort. Great business strategy. Oh, that was the last. Yeah, definitely was.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. It was great. Good discussion.
Yeah.
And I mean, from what you've mentioned, I've always enjoyed the Superman reboot, if you will, LeBron. Kind of always dug it a little bit more. It was a slower pace thing because, you know, we did get Superman to a point where he was moving worlds. You know what I mean? So, yeah, to tone it back down, please, because, you know, not because, again, I saw a comment the other day, you know, because people say, oh, Superman's so difficult to write. It's like, no, he's not difficult to write. It's just, you know, gotta know how to write it and what type of stories.
Yeah, I mean, there's always
upon it before, Dave, where more of his human side.
I mean, every character is difficult to write. If you have a character who has very little backstory, you have to make up a lot of stuff. If you have a character who has a lot of backstory, you have to think about the backstory. I mean, every character is difficult to write in a certain way. It depends on how you write the character.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people do not have a good handle on Superman, and I didn't like the Scott Snyder version of Superman, for example. That was not my Superman.
No, I didn't. Yeah, I'm just trying to remember. Like, I mean, John Burns was, you know, for the most part, it was okay. It was probably one of the better, probably the best handling of Superman since, really.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, because Brian Michael Bendis tried. I mean, he's had fun with the character, trying to, you know, bring more of a rogues gallery. But it's you know, it's all right. You know, it's all right. You know.
Again, I think that maybe the issue, like when they did that, when Denny O'Neil was rebooting Superman and took away Kryptonite, I was thinking maybe what they should do is more of a line-wide thing where they just, you know, depower everybody, like bring everybody back down to a certain level.
Yes. That makes interesting stories. I mean, like when Chris, you mentioned the bearded Superman, but that happened in a story where he was kind of depowered.
Yeah,
wasn't he?
Yeah.
You know, and it made for an interesting story to see, you know, how would Clark Superman handle this when, you know, as an adult he doesn't have his powers.
I mean, that was also originally the idea Byrne went for. His Superman was not as strong as the original Silver Age Superman.
Yeah, the you know, what, Superman Prime. What was his name?
I mean, no, wait, but yeah, no, Superman Prime was a different character. But we saw Superman.
Superman Prime is the naughty boy. It's the Golden Age Superman because he was introduced in the DC Comics Presents when they gave him, you know, that reboot, if you will, to the Silver Age and brought him back to the New Age, which brought him into the Crisis on Infinite Earth stuff.
But isn't Superboy Prime a version of Superboy that never really existed?
No, yeah, he was supposed to be the first Superman of Earth, of his Earth.
Yeah.
You know, basically Superman is outside of the comics. But the crisis came, and that's why he was so angry. He never got the chance to be the superhero he was meant to be. Temper tantrum much.
Yeah, that, I mean,
well,
that was a use of a character that should have been like completely forgotten. Like, you know, yeah, just.
He said, I like wild stuff, man. Sometimes.
No,
I mean, I don't know what.
Wild stuff is good. Yeah, you can always do some interesting stuff with that. I mean, if you have to challenge these characters, and I mean, this is. I mean, I like the idea to have a less powerful set of characters, and have them human. I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
And less of them. Like, I was always hoping that when they acknowledged there was 52 universes, great, spread all your characters over 52 universes, and so you didn't have so many characters in one universe.
I mean, I will always say, I mean, my favorite incarnation of the Avengers, and everybody laughs at me when I say this, is Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, Hawkeye, and Captain America. And then when Giant Man came in and the Wasp, because I love the Wasp, but these 6 characters, these are my favorite incarnation of the Avengers, because they are not Thor, they're not Iron Man. They really are not as strong. And even Scarlet Witch at that time wasn't all powerful, she could do everything. And so you had these characters who really had to fight, who really had to struggle. And Kent was constantly challenged for his leadership because these characters were younger and they were the 60s upstart kids, and he was this guy with the sensibilities from the 40s, the way Stan wrote him. Don Heck's art was really good at that time. I mean, I really love those issues.
When you're inked by Wally Wood, everybody looks good.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and Frank Giacoia who also inked him, and looked very, very good artwork. But I mean, the basis is Don Heck's art. I mean,
I think it's tough when you're writing a book, and as the writer, the only thing you can really do to sort of up the game is to find a way to make this character that's already powerful even more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's what we saw in the Iron Man movies and his story arc. Like, I still love him. I go back to Avengers #1 with the big clunky golden armor. I'd love I wish that Tony Stark, when he first built Iron Man in Iron Man 1, when he got back, was to have built the golden armor, a better, more refined version of the one he built when he was out in the desert, and slowly get to the sleek armor, like the one that what's his name, Stain had in the first Iron Man movie. Like the bigger, bulkier armor. It was like, you know, I love that big clunky armor, and again, it's like, what's
on
that?
The topic of the Avengers. A question on the topic of the Avengers, because, you know, would you consider West Coast Avengers a reboot? Because here we're finally showing a different side of the Avengers. I mean, you know, it was a different look at the time.
It's a spin-off. It's a spin-off.
It's a
spin-off.
So you didn't feel that, you know, how did you feel about that team selection though versus the standard team?
Absolutely love Burns' run on that book.
Yeah, I bought that for the same. You know, it was Byrne doing Avengers and, you know, writing both, wasn't it? It was West Coast Avengers was fun. But again, it was just one of those things. At first, it was like, oh, this is great. And then it's like, and then you get a certain amount of fatigue. It's like, oh, okay, this is an ongoing book, isn't it? Oh, like there's too many Avengers, and you know, I was just getting burnt out on. Yeah,
I'm an Avenger guy. I mean, my poor Conan, an Avenger. Come on, bro. Conan is an Avenger.
I mean, it's, as a story goes, it was Byrne quit the West Coast Avengers because editorial forced him to put Iron Man in the book. I mean, that's the story that goes. And then he said, "No, I don't want Iron Man on that book. I'm quitting."
Oh damn! Really? He said, "Fuck off, no more." All right, great.
Yeah,
guys, we've been at it for 2 hours. So is any closing thoughts on reboots? You know, do you think they should be done every 5 years, like a DC, or should it just be done when the time is right?
Well, DC doesn't do it every 5 years. They do it every time a new writer comes on the book.
It's every 2 years. How about that? I mean,
it's not even every 2 years.
Yeah, it's every 6 months. Every 6 months.
I mean, I think DC has changed so much that it's got to the point where I'm not even interested in trying a book. Like it's, I used to I'd hear it like, oh, so-and-so's on a title. Oh, I'll give that a try. I'm so out of tune with what DC's doing. I think the problem DC has. I mean, there was this. If you go back into the 90s when the Image Revolution happened, there's this great interview with, I believe it was with Tom DeFalco, who said, "Oh no, it won't affect us. These guys can leave Marvel. It's no problem. It's the characters who who sell books." I mean, he was wrong. It was also the creators. But I think on the other end of the spectrum, you have to see at the moment who's leaning too far to their creators. You saw this Batman, for example, and we say, "Oh, Tom King, do what you want with the book. Oh, at the end we fire you because we don't like what you're doing here anymore." But why don't you define a parameter like Marvel Studios does it? You say, okay, you can write Batman, but here are things you cannot do. Go.
And instead of letting your creatives do what they want with characters that have been around for decades, keep the characters the way they are in a certain parameter. Then you don't have to reboot every 5 minutes.
But you need to have like DC is just the same as the studio is. You need to have someone who honors the characters, who worships the characters. Like, Paul Levitz wasn't perfect at DC, but he loved those characters. He was a DC Comics fan.
And then you still had a lot of experiments going under Paul Levitz, but he said, okay, these are the parameters, you can do this and this, and if you want to do other things, then go somewhere else. I mean, this was basically what he said when the boys were no longer what he wanted, and they say, okay, take your characters and go. And it's perfect. It's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. All right, guys, we're going here for 2 hours. You've seen it at the bottom where to follow us, ICC on CC, or on Facebook at International Comics Crusaders. Of course, fam, want to visit comiccrusaders.com and undercovercapes.com. We got a whole bunch of shows coming out this week. We're doing, in case you missed it for this one, we got old timers, we got some no prize, we got some now, in case you missed. We got some good stuff this week. And hope you two have an awesome week. Hasta la próxima. Let's see what else we could talk about and hopefully not get ourselves into trouble. Snowmason
is showing up. Cool.
Just watching it on Chromecast.
Cool.
Thank you, Snowmason.
Fantastic.
Tuning in.
Fantastic. Wow.
Yeah, and that spec, man. That
Excellent.
one day got my mind blown on that on the Captain UK. I really want to start looking for that book now. I want to see if I can find it at a good price.
Yeah,
excellent.
You'd better get it now, because if Marvel are casting for Captain Britain, by the time they've cast that, eventually they're going to follow the storylines, and it'll probably be a good one to get.
Oh, you got it. Yeah, 100% book. So look for that one. That's actually a great trade. I had never seen those covers. So thank you for teaching me on that one. Now I'm gonna get myself in trouble with the wife by ordering those books.
Well, actually, use the money from the comics you're selling on eBay to buy them.
Well, that's always an excuse that runs out, because I haven't seen you ship a package in days. Gotta be smart, guys. All right, preventive maintenance by flowers a week in advance and stuff. With the honeys. That's all.
Does she know now? Every time like chocolates or flowers arrive, what have you ordered?
Exactly, right. All right, what you do? Let me check. All right, folks. I'm Omega with my homies Dave Elliott and Chris Buse. Thanks you for tuning in. Much love. Check you guys out in 2 weeks' time. Huepa, hasta la próxima, mi gente. Much love.
Auf Wiedersehen. Have a good
Bye,
time.
guys.